My name is Buddy, and I am a small golden retriever mix weighing barely 30 pounds. Most people would consider me too small to be a hero, but size has never defined courage in my world. I live with the Thompson family in a cozy house overlooking the Clearwater River, where the sound of rushing water has been my lullaby for the past 3 years. The Thompsons adopted me when I was just a puppy, and from the moment I arrived, I knew my purpose was to protect this family. Mr. Thompson works at the local mill, Mrs. Thompson teaches at the elementary school, and then there's Emma, sweet, adventurous 8-year-old Emma who has become the center of my universe. Emma and I are inseparable. Every morning, she feeds me breakfast while humming her favorite songs. Every afternoon, we play fetch in the backyard until the sun begins to set. She reads to me from her picture books, her small fingers running through my fur as she sounds out difficult words. In return, I watch over her with the dedication of a guardian angel. The river has always been part of our lives, but it's also been a source of constant worry for me. The current runs fast and deep, especially during spring when the mountain snow melts and swells the waterway. Mr. Thompson has repeatedly warned Emma about staying away from the riverbank, but children, as I've learned, are naturally drawn to danger. On this particular Saturday morning in late April, the river was more turbulent than usual. The recent rains had turned the normally calm Clearwater into a roaring beast, its waters dark and unpredictable. I could sense the danger in the air, that electric feeling that comes before something terrible happens. My instincts were on high alert as Emma played in the backyard, her laughter mixing with the sound of rushing water. As I watched her that morning, I couldn't shake the feeling that our lives were about to change forever. Little did I know that within hours, I would be called upon to prove that heroism isn't measured in pounds or inches, but in the size of one's heart and the strength of one's love. The accident happened so quickly that even my keen senses couldn't prevent it. Emma had been playing with her favorite red ball, throwing it high into the air and catching it with squeals of delight. I was lying in my usual spot under the old oak tree, keeping one eye on her and the other on the swollen river beyond our property line. Mrs. Thompson was inside preparing lunch, and Mr. Thompson was in the garage working on his truck. It was one of those peaceful family moments that you never think will be shattered in an instant. Emma threw the ball higher than usual, and a sudden gust of wind carried it toward the riverbank. Without hesitation, she ran after it. I leaped to my feet immediately, barking a warning, but Emma was already scrambling down the muddy slope toward the water's edge. The spring rains had made the ground treacherous, and I watched in horror as her small feet lost their grip on the slippery earth. Time seemed to slow as Emma tumbled toward the river. Her small body hit the water with a splash that was quickly swallowed by the roar of the current. In seconds, she was swept away, her bright yellow jacket the only thing visible as the river carried her downstream at an alarming speed. I ran to the water's edge, barking frantically to alert the family. Mrs. Thompson's scream from the kitchen window told me she had seen what happened. Mr. Thompson came running from the garage, his face pale with terror. But by the time they reached the riverbank, Emma was already hundreds of yards downstream, a tiny speck being carried away by the merciless current. "Call 911." Mr. Thompson shouted to his wife as he ran along the bank, trying desperately to keep up with his daughter. But I could see what he couldn't. The river curved sharply ahead, and once Emma disappeared around that bend, they would lose sight of her completely. In that moment, I made a decision that would change everything. While the humans ran for help, I dove into the freezing water. The current immediately grabbed me, threatening to drag me under, but I fought against it with every ounce of strength in my small body. Emma needed me, and I would not fail her. The icy water shocked my system, but I forced myself to stay focused. I could see Emma's yellow jacket ahead of me, sometimes visible, sometimes disappearing beneath the churning surface. She was fighting to keep her head above water, but I could tell she was already growing weak. As the current swept me downstream, I realized this would be the longest and most important swim of my life. Swimming in rapids is nothing like swimming in a calm lake or pool. The water has its own violent personality, grabbing you, spinning you, and trying to dash you against rocks or pull you under. Every stroke was a battle, every breath a victory. But I had one advantage over the merciless river. I had love driving me forward. The first kilometer was the hardest. My small paws worked frantically to keep me above the surface while fighting the current's attempt to drag me sideways toward the rocky banks. Several times, I was pulled under completely, the world becoming a dark, roaring chaos of bubbles and pressure. But each time I fought my way back to the surface, Emma's image in my mind gave me the strength to continue. I could still see her yellow jacket occasionally, though the distance between us seemed to remain constant. She was fighting bravely, but I could tell the cold water was sapping her strength. Children can't survive long in water this cold, and I knew time was running out. As we swept around the first major bend in the river, I lost sight of the Thompson house completely. We were now in uncharted territory for me. Parts of the river I had only seen from the road when we drove to town. The landscape rushed by in a blur of trees and rocks, the riverbanks growing steeper and more isolated. The second kilometer brought new challenges. The river widened here, which meant the current spread out and moved slightly slower, but it also meant more distance to cover if I needed to reach the bank. Debris from upstream, branches, logs, and garbage created additional obstacles. I had to navigate around a refrigerator that had been swept into the river, then dodge a massive tree trunk that rolled and pitched in the current like a living thing. My muscles were beginning to burn with exhaustion, but I pressed on. Dogs are natural swimmers, but were not built for marathon distances, especially not in conditions like these. My thick coat, usually an asset in cold weather, was now waterlogged and heavy, making every stroke more difficult. During the third kilometer, something changed. I began to gain on Emma. Whether the current had shifted or her strength was finally failing, I couldn't tell, but the distance between us was definitely decreasing. This gave me a surge of hope and energy. I pushed harder, ignoring the growing pain in my chest and legs. It was also during this stretch that I realized we weren't alone in our desperate journey. A helicopter appeared overhead, search and rescue responding to the Thompsons' call. I could see figures along the riverbank too, emergency responders trying to keep pace with us on foot. But the river was moving too fast, and the terrain was too rough for them to get ahead of us. I was Emma's only hope, and that knowledge drove me forward into the fourth and final kilometer of our terrifying race against time. By the fourth kilometer, I was running on pure determination. My paws felt like lead weights, and my lungs burned with each desperate breath. The cold water had numbed my body, but somehow, my heart kept pumping and my legs kept moving. Emma was now only about 50 yards ahead of me, but she had stopped fighting the current. Her yellow jacket was keeping her afloat, but her head kept disappearing beneath the surface for longer and longer periods. The river had narrowed again, creating faster, more dangerous rapids. Massive boulders jutted up from the water, creating a treacherous obstacle course. I watched in terror as Emma's small body was swept directly toward a cluster of jagged rocks. If she hit them at this speed, the impact could be fatal. Summoning every ounce of strength I had left, I angled my swimming toward the rocks, trying to intercept her path. The current fought me, trying to push me away from my target, but I refused to give up. This was my moment. Everything I had lived for, everything I was meant to do, came down to these next few seconds. I reached the rocks just as Emma's unconscious form was swept toward them. Using my body as a buffer, I absorbed the impact of her collision, the sharp stones scraping against my ribs as I pushed her away from the dangerous outcropping. The pain was intense, but I had done it. I had prevented her from being seriously injured. Now came the hardest part, getting both of us to shore. Emma was unconscious, her face pale and her lips blue from the cold. I grabbed the hood of her jacket with my teeth, careful not to hurt her, and began the struggle toward the riverbank. The current was still strong, still fighting to carry us downstream, but we were now in a slightly wider section where the water moved more slowly. Swimming while towing Emma was nearly impossible. Every few strokes, I had to adjust my grip on her jacket and fight to keep both our heads above water. My strength was almost completely gone, my vision blurring from exhaustion and cold. Several times, I thought we would both go under, but somehow, I found the will to continue. The helicopter overhead had called in more help. I could see emergency responders running along the bank, pointing at us and shouting instructions I couldn't hear over the roar of the water. A rescue boat was being launched from somewhere downstream, but I couldn't wait for help to arrive. With a final, desperate surge of energy, I made it to a shallow area near the bank where my paws could finally touch bottom. Dragging Emma through the last few feet of water was agony, but I managed to pull her onto a small sandy beach where the emergency responders could reach us. As hands lifted Emma from the water and began administering first aid, I collapsed on the sand, my entire body shaking from cold and exhaustion. I had done it. I had saved her. But would it be enough? The next few hours passed in a blur of sirens, medical equipment, and worried voices. Emma was rushed to the hospital, where doctors worked to treat her hypothermia and the water she had inhaled. I was taken to the veterinary clinic, where Dr. Martinez examined my cuts and bruises and treated me for exhaustion and exposure. The news crews arrived before I was even released from the vet's care. Somehow, word had spread about the small dog who had swum 4 kilometers through dangerous rapids to save a child. Reporters wanted to interview the Thompson family, and photographers wanted pictures of the hero dog. I found the attention overwhelming and confusing. I hadn't set out to be a hero, I had simply done what love compelled me to do. Emma recovered fully, though it took several days in the hospital before she was released. When she finally came home, the reunion was everything I had dreamed of during those dark moments in the river. She hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe, tears streaming down her face as she whispered, "Thank you," over and over into my fur. The community response was incredible. Letters and cards arrived from around the world. Children drew pictures of me swimming in the river. A local artist painted a mural on the side of the fire station showing Emma and me in the water. The mayor even declared a Buddy Day in my honor. But perhaps the most meaningful recognition came from an unexpected source. The American Kennel Club and several animal welfare organizations presented me with awards for bravery. More importantly, my story was used to promote water safety education and the importance of pet adoption. If my harrowing experience could prevent other accidents or help homeless animals find loving families, then every painful stroke through those rapids had been worth it. The river still flows past our house, but it sounds different now. Instead of a threat, it seems like an old friend who tested me and found me worthy. Emma still plays in the backyard, but she stays far from the water's edge, and I've noticed she never lets go of her red ball. Sometimes, late at night, I dream about those 4 kilometers. I feel the cold water, the burning in my muscles, the desperate need to reach Emma before it was too late. But I always wake up to find her sleeping peacefully in her bed, safe and sound. People call me a hero, but I know the truth. I'm just a small dog who loves his family. And sometimes, love is the most heroic thing of all. In a world that often seems to reward size and strength, I learned that the biggest hearts can come in the smallest packages. My 4-kilometer swim taught me that courage isn't about being fearless, it's about being afraid and choosing to act anyway. Emma is growing up now, becoming more responsible and cautious, but she still reads to me every evening. And when she gets to the part in her adventure books where the hero saves the day, she always looks at me and smiles. She knows that heroes come in all shapes and sizes, and that sometimes the greatest adventures happen right in our own backyard. The river continues to flow, carrying with it the memory of our desperate journey and the reminder that love can conquer even the most impossible odds.